We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it.
The problem with America is not that we go around marauding around the world imposing ourselves. The problem with America in the last 10, 15 years, since the end of the Cold War, really in the last 60 years, is that we've been too slow to get involved.
I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
You know, that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Welcome to the darkened hour.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and good evening, Adam.
Good evening, Richard.
I should say hello, everyone. I have no idea what time people are listening to this at. But anyway, the subject of today's podcast is the so-called 20th hijacker, Zacarias Moussaoui. So we're going to run through the details of his arrest, what subsequently happened with the refusal to examine his laptop, and then what we learned at his trial. So, Adam, wherever you want to start there, I'm guessing of some biographical detail, but you jump in there.
Sure. Well, the book was pretty interesting to read.
Hang on, sorry, I didn't mention the book. So if you, it's fine, but just tell people what book.
Okay.
So I mentioned, well, we're going to talk about him in general, but we've just both been reading this book. I heard you were going on Jihad by Mitchell Gray. Okay, so that's going to be like, we're going to draw particularly on that. Adam, I think I've read it quite quickly, and I think Adam has compiled 20 pages of notes. So
yes,
go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Well, the book was rather interesting in itself. It was referred to me by a friend, a fellow researcher, Nelson Martins, and I've always wanted to read the book because I myself was very interested in the Minnesota angle regarding the FBI and their connection to Oklahoma City. And there's a lot of similarities between the two agencies and a lot of critique in how they handled the Moussaoui case.
Okay, just my opinion. Can you explain the relevance of Minnesota and geographically what that is to do with Oklahoma City? Bear in mind, people not in the US, so Minnesota, Oklahoma, where are they? Why are they related? And what has Minnesota got to do with Moussaoui?
Right. Well, the Minneapolis, Minnesota agency, led by Bob Bowman, who is the heading supervisor there, and of course, everybody knows about Colleen Rowley, the whistleblower, and she was the chief legal counsel in Minnesota, and plus a 20-year agent as well. Oklahoma City is the focal point of the book, actually, only because this is where Zacarias Moussaoui flew from Pakistan to Oklahoma City, too. Zacarias Moussaoui, a little bit of background to him. Zacarias Moussaoui is a Moroccan. He lived in France for many years. He also has a brother. His brother actually wrote a book, and that's how I got acquainted with Zacarias Moussaoui. It was an interesting book, and the book itself, a short rundown, was based upon the biography of both the Moussaoui brothers and how they grew up in France and in Morocco, and they faced a lot of persecution, racism, religious prejudice as well. Moussaoui actually graduated college with high honors. He actually was an engineering student. And then somewhere along the line, this is not known, it's actually speculated by the FBI, that Moussaoui met with Salafist preachers and members of a mosque in France. And it was them that persuaded Moussaoui to go to Pakistan and train with the Afghan Services Bureau there.
About what age would he have been then, Adam?
What age would he have been?
Roughly, yeah.
I approximately 19, 20 years old.
Okay, so
very, very,
similar to the Hamburg
that's
crew,
right.
then, the sort of young men being radicalized.
Right, exactly right. And because he experienced such harsh prejudices in his life, that he felt that he needed to belong. Now, this was covered by his brother too in the book as well. That the big reason why Moussaoui actually joined these radical groups like Al Qaeda was because he felt like he didn't belong to the outside world, and that they saw him as nothing more than a lesser or a terrorist because of his ethnicity. And he was very dark-skinned too, so that, a lot of the European races actually made fun of him. And he had a very rough life. I mean, growing up in Morocco too, but when they moved to France is where he was repeatedly, almost daily, abuses of racism and prejudice there. So he goes to Pakistan and he stays there for a year, or I think 10 months. In the book, it's stated that he's there from February of 2000, and then I think he leaves in February of 2001. He then enters the United States in 2001. He enters in February 2001, Norman, Oklahoma. Now, the FBI also states that it's highly speculative in their reports, written in their 302s, the FBI 302s, which is an FBI report, draft report. They don't know who in Pakistan he met that said that he needed to go to Oklahoma City. But a little bit about why Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City itself, it has a large Muslim population, and it has for the last 70 years, because Oklahoma City, Oklahoma itself, the state, is annually considered one of the best universities, the University of Oklahoma, in regards to studying geology and oil geology itself, fossil fuel industry. And so this attracted a lot of people from the Arabic background to go there. Plus, it's also very warm in Oklahoma City. It's a very humid state itself, Oklahoma. So there's a huge population of Arabs there. This is going back all the way to the 1950s with the construction of the North American Islamic Trust, or in short, NAIT. I'll use that for short, NAITE. NAIT claims that they have 90% of ownership of all the mosques in Oklahoma, and they're known internationally in the United States. They have a huge organization led by many dignitaries in the Gulf. And so they have a lot of mosques, and they have a lot of Muslim centers in Oklahoma. And this catered to a lot of notable Muslims in Oklahoma. And one of them was a Sengali preacher named Najai, I forgot his name. El-Hajj Nadai, Ndiaye. El-Hajj Amadou Nadai. He's from Senegal, West Africa. And he's considered the most influential Islamic preacher in Oklahoma. And a lot of notable Salafist preachers in Oklahoma referred to him as their spiritual mentor. And a lot of these people are going to have a big influence on Zacarias Moussaoui later on. Moussaoui enters Oklahoma City, and he goes into a hotel and stays there for 3 weeks. I think the hotel was Residence Inn in Norman, and he stood there for a week. And he goes into the Norman Mosque itself. Now, this mosque is owned by Nadai. Nadai is actually the imam there, El-Hajj Nadai. And right away, Moussaoui, who doesn't give his real name, he actually goes by a nickname. And that nickname, what was that nickname? He was, I can't think of his nickname. I think it started with an M or something like that. But that wasn't his actual nickname. He just used it for some reason. But later on in the book, they found out that all the people that knew him in the mosque at that nickname, they lied about it. They actually knew who he was. And that, too, is speculation as to why the FBI couldn't understand as to how they knew him right away, whether he told them who he was and where he was coming from. But that was one thing Moussaoui didn't relate later on to the FBI. He wasn't very truthful about that in his interview with the FBI itself. So he stays there for a little while, and then he gets a residence, and he meets somebody named Hussein Al-Attas. Now, Hussein Al-Attas is a young student at the University of Oklahoma City. He actually knows Moussaoui by the nickname that he's given. I do want to get that nickname. I forgot. That's going to hurt because I think it was important.
We'll call it, you get the nickname. And say, okay, Adam, you've looked up the nickname, and the nickname is...
Yeah, Moussaoui's nickname is Shaquille, and this is really important because the notable members of the mosque, the Norman mosque that Moussaoui visits, only know him by Shaquille. Now, there's actually two individuals who also play a big part in the book with Moussaoui. That's Suhaib Webb, who's an imam for another mosque, and he's a member of NATE, the North American Islamic group, and also to Menepa. His name is Menepa. Now, Menepa is a black Muslim. He's a black Muslim convert. And Menepa has a long history of criminal activities. He's a gun runner. He's also a gun owner. He shouldn't be in possession of weapons. He has a long felonious history. I believe it was bank robbery and also domestic assault. And Menepa and Webb actually are prominent members of the Norman Mosque. Now, when Moussaoui visits here, everybody knows him as only Shaquille. These members only know him as Shaquille. So one day, the author of the book, Mitchell Gray, actually wants to learn Arabic. And so he knows a person by the name, he only knows him by his name is Ahmed. And so he has a relationship with him. His wife turns him on to Ahmed because he wanted to learn Arabic. And so they made a deal. And Ahmed told him, I'll teach you Arabic, but one day, because Mitchell Gray is also a lawyer, he's a trial lawyer, he asked that he wouldn't take money. Ahmed wouldn't. He thought that he wanted to propagate Islam by teaching him Arabic. But Ahmed made a deal with him, and Ahmed said, if the time ever comes, I need you for legal advice, you'll help me. And Mitchell Gray agreed. And so he wouldn't know that down the stretch that it would be Ahmed who gets the better of this deal. So a couple of days later, after the September 11th attacks, it was on September 11th, Mitchell Gray was at home, and he was watching the attacks on TV, and he gets a phone call. And the phone call is from Ahmed, and Ahmed tells him to come, if he could come to his house. He has a problem, which he needs legal advice. When he goes there, Mr. Gray meets Ahmed, his wife, and another individual. This individual is Menepta. And Menepta is a very nefarious individual. He's very tall. He was a former running back in college. And he was, like I said, he had a criminal history as well. And he actually did most of the talking while he was there. So what happened was that he starts yelling at Mitchell Gray about how the FBI has arrested a brother from the mosque, and that that he needed his help, and they don't know where he's at, and that while he's there, Menepta is actually just yelling at Gray about how the United States is keep calling Muslims as terrorists, and there was one instance where there was an FBI agent outside some 7-Eleven store by the phone booth, and Meneptah actually noticed he was an FBI agent, and that he started yelling at the agent about why he's so prejudiced against Muslims. And Mr. Gray found that odd, how Meneptah knew that he was an FBI agent, thinking that Meneptah himself was either someone who was an informant for the FBI, but that's not really known, and it's not in depth in the book or not, as to how Meneptah knew this person. By the way, his full name is Mujahid Abdul Qadir Meneptah, and I'm just going to use his last name as short, so that's why it has Meneptah. So while he's at Ahmed's home, he finds out that the person that they're talking about his name is Hussein al-Attas, and Mr. Gray does not know who he is, so he takes down notes about where he is. So Mr. Gray actually calls in the next couple of days to FBI offices in Oklahoma City who give him the runaround. And so they, in essence, after a week, he finds out that he has been arrested by Immigration Natural Services and not by the FBI. He also finds out that he was arrested with another individual named Zacarias Moussaoui. Now, this is not known to Meneptah and not known to Gray, because Meneptah or Ahmed didn't tell Gray about Zacarias Moussaoui at the time. Not yet, anyway. So they find out that he's being held on $5,000 bond, Hussein al-Attas, at an INS center, and that Mitchell Gray actually talks to Ahmed days later. He talks to Meneptah days later about that he's being held on immigration services. So they're desperate, and he's not alone. He's not alone being arrested. There was another individual named Ali that was arrested, Mukarram Ali. Mukarram Ali is a younger individual. Of course, Mitchell Gray doesn't know the link between Ali and al-Attas until much later, about why that's important, and I'll get into that in a bit. But it seems that Meneptah and Suhaib Webb want to bail out only al-Attas, but not Ali. They want to dismiss him. They don't think he's very important. So they go and they bail. Actually, Suhaib Webb goes and tries to get bail, but he fails in that regard. So Meneptah actually goes and bails him out with $5,000. Now, the money itself comes from the mosque in Norman. Now, according to Mitchell Gray in the book, this is important because when he goes to the mosque, he notices that there's a room on the side. And on the side of the room, there are two slots. One slot is for donations for Muslims in America, and the other slot is for donations to Muslims abroad. Now, in the book, he insinuates a bit of speculation here, and he's careful to suggest so, thinking that the funds are going to madrasas in Pakistan to support Muslims there, but he's not sure of that. And later on, that this mosque, later on in the book, it was under investigation because the North American Islamic group was under investigation due to the Holy Land Foundation, which was under investigation by the FBI, and that they were found to be guilty of supporting Islamic radicals abroad. Al-Qaeda, As-Sahab in the Philippines as well. Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines. I'm sorry, I said As-Sahab. That's in Africa. Now, so the mosque itself was found out to be absolved of any terrorist links, as well as Meneptah and Webb. And Mr. Gray states in the book, at no point did the FBI find that Meneptah, Webb, or even Nadai, the Imam Nadai, had any links, direct links, terrorism links, to Islamic radicals. However, it is assumed that in the book that these people knew a lot of nefarious individuals abroad, especially one notable individual who's in Chechnya. And this is a person that we covered in the Chechen war, the Chechen Ibn Khattab. Just a short rundown, Ibn Khattab is a Chechen Islamic leader in Chechnya, and he is actually linked with Chechen rebels, Muslim rebels, and he has a close association to Osama bin Laden. So because of that connection, or that, as they say, the Kevin Bacon connection, where, you know, that person knows somebody, and that was the link to the Norman mosque itself, because the Imam Nadai knew Ibn Khattab, and Ibn Khattab knew bin Laden, but there was no actual direct connection with terrorist groups itself. And Mitchell Gray is very careful about in the book, which I actually liked about that, because you have authors that just assume and just speculate, and they consider that evidence. But Gray's being careful here. So what happens? So Al-Attas is freed on bail. He actually states to the FBI that he's not going to go back he wants to go back to Norman. And Meneptah and Webb, they actually lied to the FBI, because when they go to INS, they're interviewed by the FBI, and he says the reason why they want him back was because he worked at the mosque itself, and he worked with children. There's a special wing of children that he teaches the Islamic Sharia law to. But they found out that this wasn't true. He had no intentions of going back, and the reason why was simple. A week prior to him being arrested, FBI agent Harry Samet gets a memo about Zacarias Moussaoui, who just arrived inside the United States. And Moussaoui actually goes to Airman Flight School. Now, Airman Flight School is located in Norman. It is a famous flight school that's been around for decades. It caters to a lot of foreign students that come abroad that want to learn how to fly. And so as Moussaoui was inside the United States, he, from his hotel, he goes to Airman. In fact, the first day, by the way, as he's inside the United States, the first phone call he makes is to Airman Flight Training School, which was kind of odd, considering that he just got to the United States, and that's the first phone number he has in his notebook. So he calls him 4 times. He speaks to the trainer there, and he goes there. And while he's there, he talks to the flight trainer about flying 747s, but not landing them. And this is really peculiar. He asks many odd questions. He's acting very suspicious. And so that trainer actually calls the FBI. And so he tells him about this instance about Moussaoui asking these strange questions about why he just wants to fly, not land. And so the FBI says, all right, we'll go and interview him. And then Harry Samet and another agent go into the residence that he's staying with Hussein Al-Attas. Now, Al-Attas claims that he doesn't know Moussaoui by name, just knows him as Shakil. He then invites Moussaoui to stay with him in his house. And later on, I'll tell you why this is a little bit peculiar, but at the time, nobody knows why. And so they go and interview Moussaoui, and Moussaoui is separated from Al-Attas. So one agent's talking to Al-Attas, the other one, Samet, is talking to Moussaoui. And so he's talking to Moussaoui, and Moussaoui can't give him a reason as to why he's inside the United States in the first place, about how he's getting money, because if later on it's found out that Ramzi bin Shabib, an Al-Qaeda link, an Al-Qaeda financier, who's supposed to be involved in 9/11 attacks as a pilot, but he can't get inside the country, is actually in Germany, and he's sending money to the hijackers and operatives here in the United States. So he wires Moussaoui $14,000 from Germany to I forgot the name of the place that Moussaoui received the money, but he receives the money itself. And so he can't tell the FBI how he's getting his funding because he doesn't have a job. So
does that give a financial link? I mean, just an observation. It doesn't sound like he's very well prepped in terms of what to say and what not to say and how to obtain a cover, even compared to the other members of the Hamburg cell we looked at. And, you know, they did kind of things that drew attention to themselves too. Okay, like they left a laptop with a flight simulator behind. Mohammed Attar is meant to have gone in and talked about crop dusting in a rental office somewhere, right? They regularly got speeding tickets. Say regularly, I think there's 2 or 3 of the hijackers got speeding tickets. But just on the thing that they're receiving money from Ramzi bin al-Shabib, does that provide a financial link then? That if you could find Zacarias Moussaoui's account, you can trace it back to Ramzi bin al-Shabib, look at his outgoings, and see then that the various members of the Hamburg cell, and particularly the 3 pilots, are they also? Can you go from Zacarias Moussaoui to Shabib to the other 3 and uncover the network that way?
Right, but in the beginning, the FBI didn't know how he was getting this money. That's the reason. I'm going to explain as to why that's important later. Because when they actually arrest Moussaoui later, they arrest Al-Attas, they arrest Moussaoui as well. They want. I might as well just bring it up anyway now. Moussaoui had actually 2 knives in his car. He actually rents a car as well, by the way. So he has a rental car. And he actually gets money to fly at airmen, to train at airmen flight industry. The money itself is located in the information that was retrieved from the laptop. Now let me explain as to why that's important, because that's an important point that you raise. When Samet actually detains Al-Attas, actually immigration arrests Al-Attas, the FBI arrests Moussaoui itself. But Samet actually wants to open up a criminal investigation with Moussaoui. Now, he has to give a reason why. Now, this is very big, because Samet actually is going by his own inclination. He thinks Moussaoui is a terror operative. Now, he's inside the United States. He wants to do something that involves with a plane. And he comes up with a scenario thinking that this is a terror operative who's using a plane as a weapon. Now, he doesn't have direct evidence. The direct evidence would be whatever's in his house, whatever's in that house that Al-Attas is residing in. Now, he needs a warrant. He can't get a warrant because Moussaoui is a foreign national. So he has to get what they call a FISA warrant. And the FISA warrant is the Foreign Intelligence Service Amendment. Now, that is for people who are acting as a foreign agent, not for domestic. Since Moussaoui is visiting the United States and he has a visitor's a visa, a tourist visa, a foreign visa, he can't get a regular warrant through the U.S. courts. We're talking about Harry Samet, the FBI agent. He has to get what they call a FISA warrant. Now, a FISA warrant, in regards to what Samet did, Samet made a little mistake, and he opened up the Moussaoui case as a criminal case, not an immigration case. If he opened the case as an immigration case, he probably could have showed. Now, but Mitchell Gray, the author, says that's not true, because he had a ton of circumstantial evidence that shows Moussaoui himself, his actions, actually could have led to a FISA warrant by any court in the United States, much less a court in Oklahoma City. But because he opened up a draft regarding a FISA warrant, he then sends it to Mike Maltby. Mike Maltby is the supervisor to Henry Samet. And so he sends the draft to Mike Maltby and says, I need a FISA warrant to search Moussaoui's laptop and the residence of Hossein Al-Attas, in which Moussaoui was held in. And so the FISA warrant itself was shot down because Mike Maltby actually says that, no, you don't have enough circumstantial evidence to show that this is true. And so right away, Harry Samet is complaining to supervisors abroad. He can't believe it. And he's like desperate. He says, I know this guy is here to do something harmful. Now, this is on August 21st, 2001. Mitchell Gray suggests in the book that the FBI had already previous information to Moussaoui's arrest that led to them knowing that there were so many warnings that had been blinking red from Phoenix, from Minnesota, from New York, and from Oklahoma City, to show that there were people here flying in training centers. Now, one of them was called the Phoenix Memo, and that was drafted by Ken Williams, who's an FBI agent out of the Phoenix office. And he sent that memo to Director Robert Mueller. Colleen Rowley, who is a long-term FBI agent and also assistant legal counsel lawyer for the FBI in Minnesota, actually states that she read the FISA draft by Harry Samet, and she complained to Robert Mueller saying that Samet's information was well enough to show that they could have had a FISA warrant, which could have gone through Moussaoui's laptop, excuse me, and Al-Atta's home. Fast forward to 9/11, the day of 9/11.
Can I hold you before you fast forward, Adam?
Sure.
There's
sure.
a factor of information from French intelligence being presented to Mike Maltby too, right now. I don't know what he'd done, Zacarias Moussaoui, to raise a red flag with French intelligence, but well, yeah, two or three things actually. The British knew about him, the French knew about him, and he'd been at the Malaysia summit. So the CIA knew about him, but they claimed under a different name, right? So when the French intelligence said, like, is presented to Mike Maltby and said, like, he's known to French intelligence, he said, well, we don't know it's the same Zacarias Moussaoui, right? Like, there could be another Zacarias Moussaoui in France. Now, I'll put a question in and you answer it when you like. Sure. Okay, so you might want to fast forward to 9/11 first and leave it. But this is kind of like a key issue, because we see like 4 names associated with the decision not to open the laptop, right, to not get permission for that. One of them, other than what we've discussed, is Tom Wilshire, who we've discussed, who was seconded to the FBI from the CIA. He's in the Bin Laden unit at the CIA and is really like maybe you could say the key figure in like not passing on the information about the 2 West Coast hijackers to the FBI. So it's just interesting that he reappears there to do with suppression of another potential hijacker, and information comes to light about that. And the other is a figure called Dave Frasker, who was the supervisor of the FBI, and he was involved in also with the Ken Williams memo and the investigation of Robert Wright, the FBI agent, into funding for Islamist terror. And also, as Sander Hicks, our friend Sander Hicks, documents, with the undercover agent Randy Glass, which is a bit of a different story, but you can point to like 4 things about Arab terrorism inside the United States that Dave Frasker is there present and effectively keeping a lid on, right? And this is why Mike Rupert, the LAPD narcotics investigator, who wrote, I don't know, maybe in my mind, it's like the first really big comprehensive book on 9/11. You know, I forget the publication date off the top of my head, right? But from was Crossing the Rubicon, okay? And he brings up the case of Colleen Rowley and Zacarias Moussaoui's laptop, and points to Dave Frasker as a man who is working for the agency or something, the CIA, to keep information suppressed. Mike taking like the conspiracy perspective that this was deliberate, okay? And Mike's point is that having worked for the LAPD and seen the FBI in action through the 70s and 80s, he said the idea that they would need a warrant to open a laptop is a joke, right? They're just like, the FBI are total cowboys. They do whatever they want to do. So we get these 2 different visions, because we've spoken to someone from the FBI, and the image given is just, no, they had to be very careful because it's all going to be in court one day, and if they misstep in any way. So you have 2 different images the FBI presented, from them being like very careful and under like severe legal restraint, really having their hands tied behind their back, and they have to double check everything, cross every T, dot every I. And then you have the other vision of like the FBI are cowboys, they're a law unto themselves, and there's no way they would have like not gotten a warrant or been concerned about violating the rights of some Moroccan French guy who's talking about like flying planes into buildings, right? So that's sort of the big question I have all dumped on you at once there. Now, you go ahead and fast forward to 9/11 or whatever you're going to do, but just that, and pick up on that whenever you wish to.
No, I'll actually, those are very good points you raised, and I'm going to try to answer most of them. But pre 9/11, yes. When Harry Samet sent his memo regarding the FISA warrant, he also contacted French intelligence. And French intelligence sent him information regarding Moussaoui while he was living in France, and that they found out that he was commiserating with notable Salafist members at numerous mosques while in France. So they sent him a bunch of information showing that there's a link. Now, this is important because this is what the FISA warrant needs to approve for a FISA warrant itself. They have to show that there's a foreign agent known a direct link to terrorism, any terrorist operation, individual, or organization. Now, just alone with the French intelligence, that was alone, according to Colleen Rowley, according to Mr. Gray, the author of the book, in which he states that that was enough. Just that alone shows that, yes, you have a foreign agency, France, showing that Moussaoui did commiserate with notable terrorist organizations and individuals. And not only that, you also have the interview of Moussaoui himself, where he actually states that with Al-Atas, it's actually Al-Atas interview that implicates Moussaoui. And I don't know whether that was deliberate or not, but when the interviewing agent interviews Al-Atas, Al-Atas says that Moussaoui has a problem with the United States and Israel, that he would harm Americans if they were to harm Muslims. Another statement made by Al-Atas was that Moussaoui himself visited Pakistan, and Pakistan at the time was a known terrorist country hotspot. Those instances alone, right there, would have given any supervisor, FBI supervisor of any state, enough reason to approve for a FISA warrant. In regards to Dave Frasca, who is the FBI's, I think, the lead supervisor of the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, or the RDF, RDU, or RFU, I think. When Colleen Rowley actually complained to Bob Bauman, who's the supervisor of the Minneapolis field office, it was Dave Frasca who tells Colleen Rowley not to proceed with the investigation into Moussaoui because he thought that they might screw up something that was other investigations linked to Moussaoui elsewhere in the country, which really, that was quite a stretch, if you ask me. And I don't know whether that is true or not, but boy, it makes you wonder, like, why was Dave Frasca so adamant about not having Moussaoui's laptop? Which, by the way, Moussaoui is actually almost implicating himself, as well as his friend Hussein Al-Atas, about why Moussaoui's there in the first place. Wanting to just fly planes and not land them, about why he's in the country in the first place. He actually lied to the FBI agent. So in regards to, I think with the Phoenix memo itself, the Arizona memo, it shows you that in previous, they had actually an informant that was responding to Ken Williams. And I forgot the guy's name, but he was actually a Muslim convert himself. And he actually knew about Hani Hanjour, who went to the University of Arizona in 1992, who was actually learning how to fly in the flight training schools in Arizona. And he told Ken Williams that there's a huge population of Arabs and Muslims during the mid-'90s, early 90s, that want to learn how to fly. And so Ken Williams wrote the Phoenix memo in 2000 and drafted it and sent it to Robert Mueller, the FBI director. Along with that, you also have Robert Wright, who is an FBI agent and who's a whistleblower, comes out later, and he's a lesser whistleblower. Nobody really knows about him. And he states that he was suppressed by superiors regarding the influx of Arab citizens, Muslim citizens from Afghanistan and Pakistan that want to learn how to fly planes as well. So you have all these agents and all these memos that are coming out months prior to 9/11 attacks, showing you, yes, there is, there's warnings here, and they think that there's a large terrorist operation plot that will happen inside the United States using planes. Now, if you want to go even further back than that to show that there was this inclination of using planes as weapons, go back to 1995 and the interview with Bajinka plot operator follower Abdul Hakim Murad, who, when interrogated by Philippine interrogators, one including Rodolfo Mendoza, who finds out not through torture, although they did torture Murad, but he actually was very nice to Murad, and Murad responded to him. Murad actually tells him that there are people inside the United States learning how to fly planes and that they're going to crash them into buildings. That information, that's 1995 now, that information was sent, all the information that Rodolfo Mendoza gathered, he sent to the FBI. His response was silence. The FBI did not respond to him, even though they got the information. So that's 6 years prior to 9/11, let alone the Colleen Rowley memo, the Harry Salmon memo regarding the FISA warrant, and Bob Bowman and Dave Frasca and Mike Maltby all shooting them down. And it came out later that through Rowley's personal letter, she wrote a personal letter to Robert Mueller, the FBI director, stating that what she thought was the problem. The problem was that there was a huge disconnect between FBI superiors, headquarters, and the agents on the field. The agents on the field in New York, in Phoenix, in Minnesota, in Oklahoma, all knew way back in 2000 that there was a problem of fundamentalists, of Arab foreign citizens coming into the United States, and all of them, most of them, were learning how to fly in flight training schools in those cities. And it was a huge disparity, percentage of American students and Arab students. It was huge between the years 99 to 2001. And it's not like because it came out later that Mueller, before the 9/11 Commission, stated, quote, that he did not have any prior warnings about Arabs learning how to flight schools. Does that sound familiar? Because that's what Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State to the Bush administration, said before the 9/11 Commission, in which she said, quote, "We had no idea that they would use planes as weapons," end quote. Now, not only did they commit perjury, Mueller and Rice, they had this information going all the way back to 1995, that these operators were learning how to use planes as weapons. Now, going back...
Can I ask a point of clarification,
sure.
Adam? When you say there's a disproportionate number of Arabs learning to fly planes, okay, presumably the number of Arabs actively involved in learning to fly for terrorist reasons is tiny, right? We're talking about dozens. Okay, so is that a kind of cultural thing that Arabs like to, it's prestigious in Arab culture or something to be a pilot, and therefore the hijackers sort of get lost in that? What's with the disproportionately high number?
Well, I should have been a little bit more clear. I'm glad you brought this up. During the period of 1999 to 2001, the percentage of Arabs in flight training schools, I think, Scott, this is coming from the Office of Inspector General Review of the FBI's handling of the September 11th attacks. In that memo, it stated that between 1999 and 2001, according to the FBI, by the way, agents of the FBI, that there was a huge influx between those years as opposed to other years prior. A huge spike. It was like 200% spike of Arabs learning how to fly in flight training schools. Now, this is not to say that all of them were terrorists and they were all learning how to flight training. No, it just says, it shows that there was a good number of operatives, Al-Qaeda operatives, or operatives from some other radical organization that were inside the United States, and that they were learning how to fly in flight training.
I think my problem there is that doesn't, to say it's like a spike in terms of percentage doesn't tell mean much, because if it's like, if there's 200 Arabs in total learning to fly in US flight schools, and then there's like a 50% spike, well, that's only 300, and yeah, terrorism could account for that. So I can imagine, you know, because we only, of course, like, all the focus is put on the 20 hijackers, Moussaoui included, right? But of course, you know, you talked about the hijacking, like the hijacking of Flight 23, which didn't happen, right? And the idea of 9/11 being a much bigger plot. So yeah, you can imagine maybe there are like in the low hundreds of hijackers, but I just don't have a clue whether there's like at any given time hundreds of Arabs learn to fly or thousands of Arabs learn to fly inside the United States. So would a figure of like tens or hundreds cause a spike?
Right. Well, that's information from the FBI. They don't. The one thing about the Inspector General report of the FBI's handling an investigation of the September 11th attacks is that the FBI actually mismanaged a lot of information regarding the terror cells inside the United States. And the agents actually, like Harry Sammet and like Colin Rowley, state that that's the reason why the superiors in Minnesota and Oklahoma City didn't take this seriously. And that was the big complaint against Mueller, is that these agents from Phoenix and Minnesota and Oklahoma and New York were all stating that there was a lot of operatives inside the United States at that time, and that they tried to get the attention of their superiors and say, listen, from the information that we gathered, there's going to be a huge operation. They just don't know what cities.
So, I mean, are you painting a picture where there are dozens and dozens into the hundreds of potential pilots training?
I think there were hundreds, and the reason why was because during I wanted to say this flavor, but I'll bring it up now because it's relevant. During Zacarias Moussaoui trial in 2006, it's Moussaoui's his own testimony states that there was a second wave of attacks inside the United States.
Now, it's never clear which one Moussaoui is meant to be a part of. I don't forget, was he meant to be doing something on 9/11 itself, or was he one of the guys for the second wave?
According to him, he was selected as the initial plot. But because, according to Moussaoui, he says that somehow he must have either fell out of favor with bin Laden or the Hamburg cell, that they demoted him to the second wave of attacks.
Okay, and he was talking about flying into the White House, okay, which, if it's any of them, it's got to be Flight 93 if it's in the initial wave.
Okay, now, according to the testimony of the flight attendant, Sandra Bradshaw, who is a flight attendant of Flight 93, that memo actually could be retrieved by archive.org. She states on the phone that she heard one of the hijackers state that they were going to crash into the U.S. Capitol. Whether they were going to or not, I don't know, but that's coming from...
Did Ramzi bin al-Shabib say that as well, under interrogation?
Again, but take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, because he's tortured.
He was actually tortured, right. He's actually tortured. Now, because it's not really definitively known. Now, there were three targets that were supposedly for 93. It was the White House, the Capitol, and the monument, actually. I don't know if many people know about that. The Washington Monument was actually a target.
The obelisk.
Right, the obelisk. Now,
what a strange target.
Right, I don't know why.
I mean, very hard to hit, I imagine, as well.
I can't tell you. But I also heard that there was rumors on forums that World Trade Center 7 was a target, but it wouldn't have even reached...
Yeah, okay, it's tangential. That's a big topic, right? And that's appeared in anyway, Ryan Dawson actually had that in his documentary. I imagine he might have retracted it now from like recent changes of perspective. But let's not go there, because we could discuss that at the time.
Right,
that's a big topic.
Sure,
right.
Sure. But according to Moussaoui himself, now I think Moussaoui, by the way, Moussaoui actually went to trial in 2006, and he acted as his own lawyer. According to the judge, this was not advised, but actually the judge was surprised at the intelligence of Moussaoui, and he says that he actually knew more about legal U.S. law than most lawyers. And because the FBI, actually under Mueller, states that Moussaoui was just a dumb terrorist.
You sort of get that impression, right? If he comes and says things like, "Oh, I want to learn to fly a plane, but I don't care about landing," right? He does sound like a pretty dumb guy. And then he's doing a grand performance in court. That's like...
Right, and it doesn't, but it poses a problem. Like, is this guy, either unprepared, or is he playing the dummy, or is he really dumb and trying to look smarter than what he is? But if you go by what he did in his own trial, you would say, hey, that's pretty smart of him, because actually during the trial, he actually saw the writing on the wall. His lawyers tried to get him to go through the trial and try to plead not guilty. But Moussaoui changed his plea to guilty, and because of that, he actually admitted his part to the 9/11 attacks, because there was so much circumstantial evidence regarding him. Now, to go a little bit before that, to build up on it, after 9/11 attacks, of course, they get the warrant to search the premises of Hussein al-Attas and to search Moussaoui's laptop. And according to what they find in Hussein al-Attas' apartment, they find shin guards, fighting gloves, manuals for crop dusters, manuals for 747 planes, all this incriminating evidence. And on the laptop of Moussaoui, a lot of it's redacted from public view. But what they found, what's public, according to Mitchell Gray, the author of the book, states that in the computer, they found crop dusting materials and chemicals, and as well as manuals on how to fly 747s. But the majority of the information in the laptop is not made for public view. So there was a lot more information that we still don't know that's in the laptop, even today, to this very day. It's still
okay, because Robert Mueller said it wouldn't have led to stopping 9/11, right?
That's what he says. Now,
Yeah.
according to Sabat and Rowley and Ken Williams and all those agents from Phoenix and Minnesota and Oklahoma City, they say that with the information that they got from Moussaoui after 9/11, that information would have stopped part of the 9/11 attacks at least, at the very least.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, what I read on History Commons and on, oh, sorry, his name just left my, disconnected us, Kevin Fenton's article on this, he says connections to 11 of the hijackers could have been directly made. And then Ramzi bin al-Shabib's in there, and that leads you other places too, right? So just I'm going to bring in George Tennant as an angle here, because George Tennant made a trip to see President Bush when he was on holiday in Texas, right? Which Tennant then forgot that he made this trip. Okay, and it was August the 21st. I didn't think to say this before the interview, so I didn't note down the date, right? And so, yeah, you tell me if I'm saying anything wrong here, but as I recall, that's the trip that he forgot about, right? When he was in front of the 9/11 Commission. And that just doesn't seem in any way credible that he forgot. I mean, I don't believe he forgot about it at all, right? So it just, you can't obviously say what he spoke about, but you can put those two dots right alongside each other. That it's right at the time of Zacarias Moussaoui's laptop being discovered and him being arrested. And then Tennant is reported to, when he was informed of the attacks on 9/11, to have said, I wonder if it's got something to do with that guy in Minnesota.
Bingo. That leads right into Tom Wilshire, right? Because that's what you brought up before, a point about Tom Wilshire. Yes, Alex Station, the deputy director of Alex Station was Tom Wilshire. His superior was Scheuer, but Scheuer was replaced by Richard Blee in 2000, in 1999, excuse me. Yes, unbelievably, Tennant actually not only says that to 9/11 Commission, but also to the Joint House Inquiry, because he actually is interviewed by the inquiry itself. The Joint Inquiry testimony of Tennant is a lot more revealing than 9/11 Commission. Now, he says that to Tim Romer. Tim Romer is actually the 9/11 Commission member who states that you only visited the president once in the month of August. And Tennant responds that, quote, yeah, either he's on leave or I'm here and on leave itself. He's in Texas because Bush was in Texas at the time, and Tennant was on leave. And he doesn't explain why he's on leave, but he says that he doesn't see the president at all in the month of August. But he sends a briefer, a CIA briefer, a daily presidential briefer to the ranch on the 21st. Now, that's really convenient, because now what does that tell you? Tennant actually has no link to whatever's briefed on to the president. But what's briefed to the president is the information that was gathered from Ahmed Wassem, the Millennium Plot Bomber. In what he states in the brief, most of the information from that interview, it states that bin Laden is attacking the United States and using planes as weapons, but he doesn't state which cities, what time, whatever, the details, the fine details. But to go back to Alex Station.
Sorry, can I just pause you there a second?
Yes,
I was, in my mind, George Tenet definitely visited the president himself, right, and was not honest about that. It wasn't a briefer that was sent. Am I right? Am I right or wrong about that?
He actually states before the joint inquiry and to Tim Romer that when Tim Romer actually goes, you don't see the president, there's a quote, you don't see the president once in the month of August, and Tenet states either, quote, no, either he's on leave or no, either I'm on leave or he's down in Texas. And then Romer follows up, quote, then who sees the president on the 21st? Quote, Tenet says, the briefer, the presidential daily briefer from the CIA.
And you don't have any information that conflicts that?
Is there any information no.
That's
That's coming from Tenet's mouth himself. Interestingly enough, Romer's like in shock. And then the next thing he gets, he goes, like, first of all, you can see in the video, if you ever see the video, Romer's like, he cannot believe that Tenet doesn't see Bush in this month, because this is the month that Alex Stations, Richard Blee, and Tenet go and run and have that emergency meeting with Condoleezza Rice and the State Department saying something big is going to happen inside the United States. And then Rice dismisses it and says that your information is vague, in which it was. But the information is coming from information from Alex Station. However, that information is not shared with the FBI itself, and the FBI agents of Mark Rossini, Doug Miller. Tom Wilshire, the deputy director, actually states that we're not going to let Colleen Rowley and their information try to open up Moussaoui's laptop, because it's not for them to open up. It's not their the information that's gathered from Alex Station is not for the FBI to know. Now, he does this to the Doug Miller cable that we spoke about previously, in which Doug Miller states that he wanted to share the information of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi having U.S. visas to FBI, and that Tom Wilshire didn't want the information from Alex Station to be shared with Rowley to help in the FISA warrant of Harry Samet and to open up the laptop. And, of course, 9/11 happens. It's all too late. Doesn't matter. But, of course, the laptops, and they get the warrant anyway to open up the laptop and to search Al-Attah's home, and all this incriminating evidence is there. Now, when the FBI gets this information, and of course everyone's deflated, Harry Samet is like, he's emotionally destroyed, because he actually believes in his heart that he thinks that with the information that they gotten out of the apartment, the laptop, they could have stopped 9/11. Yeah. Whether, now, let's just hypothetical, whether he believes that or whether that could have been true, that's a big stretch, because Samet couldn't have known anything about al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi and Hani Anjur out west. He wasn't privy to that information, because that information wasn't shared with the FBI to begin with. And that's, of course, blame from the CIA's Alex Station. So that part of the plan could have went through, even if they stopped the Hamburg cell in the east with the information that they got. Now, the finer details was brought out in the Moussaoui trial. And Moussaoui actually went against the advice of his lawyer and states that, yes, he's guilty. And he pleads guilty to a number of crimes. Title 18, which is a criminal act against the United States using aircraft to smash into American targets. He pled guilty to conspiracy to embark on terrorism inside the United States. It was like 5 other counts as well. And then they have a penalty phase called the penalty phase that comes out. So Harry Samet has to take the stand. And Harry Samet knows that the information that he has is relevant to prosecute Moussaoui. even though that the defense attorneys for Moussaoui claimed that a lot of it is speculation, that he could be held to perjury, which could destroy Harry Samet, on the other hand, if his information is not valid. But it came out that Samet's information about Moussaoui, his previous inclinations, will not just prosecute Moussaoui, but was well enough to get that FISA warrant. So in other words, the superiors that shut down Samet, saying that all the information that he had prior to August 2001 was just speculation, it was more than enough to warrant a FISA warrant, which could have led to the information that they got after 9/11. So in other words, that they could have probably prevented part of 9/11 with the information if they had that FISA warrant, right? So it makes you wonder why Dave Frasca, why Tom Wilshire, why Robert Mueller and Mike Maltby were so adamant and not in denying the FISA warrant claimed by Harry Samet.
Yeah.
And
you just left with two narratives, right? I mean, Colleen Rowley is neither critical as she has been of the actions of the FBI people we've mentioned, has never said it was a conspiracy or anyone wanted it to happen. No, much like Mark Rossini says about what went on at Alex Station, the FBI officer seconded there, right? FBI agent seconded there. So and on the other hand, you have people like Mike Rupert writing his Crossing the Rubicon book, where he does make that case. And it's like a paradigm shift almost, like there's two ways of seeing this, of interpreting this data, I suppose.
Yeah, to go back to your point about Rowley. Now, Rowley wrote two memos, one to FBI superiors and one personally to Robert Mueller, the FBI director. Rowley was quite careful in her memo to Mueller, but she did state that, yes, the FBI didn't maliciously intend to not share the information or to deny the FISA warrant, but she said that there was a huge disconnect between the agents on the field and superiors itself.
Yeah.
And that she says that that just alone from the French intelligence that was shared with Samet should have been enough for the FISA warrant to be approved. But she also said that agents that were desperate to get into Moussaoui's laptop wanted a criminal warrant based on the intelligence from the intelligence that the French divided. And she stated that FBI superiors did not take the threats of previous instances of the memos that were coming from Phoenix of terrorism seriously. But she did say, and to get to your point, she did make it clear that she said to Mueller that she did not think that superiors in Minnesota, in Oklahoma City, did it maliciously. And that was to not label her as a conspiracy theorist.
Sure. She actually said it was a joke that was made in the office about, like, the higher-ups working for Bin Laden or something. It was a joke that was made.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
I thought it was a smart move by her point, by the way, to make sure of that.
Yeah.
Because she has no evidence to suggest so.
Sure. So, that's my question list concluded. So there's anything like you'd like to say, I'll hand it over to you in a second to do that. I just want to, I've been lucky, in the two reasons. I had a copy of The Watchdogs Don't Bark, John Duffy and Ray Nowazewski's book next to me. And I happened to have opened it on the right page for the Tennant thing, where it's talking about Tim Romer questioning Tennant in the commission. And he asked him about seeing the president between August 6th and September 11th. And Tennant said he didn't. I didn't see the president. I was not in the briefing system during this time. He was on vacation. I was here. So Romer repeated the question. And exactly as you describe it, Romer sat for a moment just staring at Tennant, seemingly unsure of what to make of his testimony. Because they went back and forth with Tennant repeatedly denying that he saw him. And then after the session closed, I'm reading from the book here, with the final public interviews of the CIA director now in the rear view, Tennant's staff messaged the commission that he had misspoken. Tennant had in fact spoken of Bush at least twice on August 17th and 31st.
Spoken with him by phone?
It doesn't say that I don't know if the memo said, right? I'm actually thinking it was, again, his name just left my head, the CIA guy, Ray, help me out here, Adam, Ray, he was the guy that did the Daily Brief.
Ray McGovern.
Ray McGovern. It was in an interview. I'm pretty sure I've heard this in an interview when John Gold interviewed Ray McGovern. They talked a lot about Tennant's connections with that. So before we put this out, I'll re-listen to that and see if I can get clarity. But the memo said he spoke to him twice. And when Thomas Keane was asked about it, he said, I don't think Tennant misspoke. I think he misled. Hi everyone, just an insert. I checked this out after we recorded, and George Tennant did fly to see the president on his vacation on August 17th. And that's what makes it so incredulous that he forgot that. It's just not believable. And then obviously raises the suspicion that if he lied about that, he probably lied about what was said there too, or at least we've no reason to believe him. And this is something Ray McGovern does address in his interview with John Gold, which I will link to in the info box. Okay, back to it.
Which is interesting, but I think it goes back to your point. I think that was regarding Moussaoui's laptop, actually, because there was too much coincidental. There's too much coincidences here because remember he gives the presidential daily brief to the briefer on the 21st. That's the same day Moussaoui's arrested.
Right.
So that's what I think that was the reason. But why? So because Tennant doesn't explain why, right? He doesn't explain why. And he doesn't explain what was stated in those calls, right? So that leads up to the imagination as to what they could have been talking about on the 31st. And what was the other date? The 6th? The 3rd? Or the 8th?
17th and 31st.
The 17th and 31st.
The 17th is a little too early.
I would like to know what they were talking about at that time, if that's the case. But then again, why would Tennant not tell the commission that he spoke with Bush twice? Interestingly enough, I find to me it's pretty incriminating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I you know what? Maybe now that I'm thinking about it, he would have to explain what they were talking about. And maybe that's what he didn't want. Maybe that's what he wanted hidden from the 9/11 Commission. But why? That's the question.
Yeah, there's more in there about Tennant not mentioning it actually in the book and in John Gold's interview too, I think. So I might actually just look that up before we pop this out and put an insert maybe if I find something in there that clarifies that, because they do talk a lot about why.
Right.
So yeah, I won't include what I'm saying now. I'll cut this bit. So I'll come back in with a question. Okay, Adam, anything else you'd like to say on this before we conclude?
Sure. The book by Mr. Gray, I heard you were going on jihad. I thought it was an excellent book. It did go into detail about Moussaoui, why he entered the United States and the crimes that he himself admitted to itself. Incidentally, Mr. Gray really is off the radar, it seems, much like in the way of Kevin Fenton and Paul Thompson. These guys wrote excellent books, and you never hear from them again. And, leads me to the question as to why we have not heard from them again.
Okay, well, speaking of Kevin Fenton, I will link to his article. It's very concise, references History Commons, and really goes through this incredibly well. That's an article on newsbud.com, so I'll link to that in the comments box below. Too. Okay, thank you very much, Adam. And
thank you, Richard.
We'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. After we finished, we realised we'd neglected to mention the 2014 story of Zacarias Moussaoui accusing two senior Saudi royals of funding the 9/11 attacks, Prince Turki Al Faisal and Prince Bandar bin Sultan, through his wife, Princess Haifa Al Faisal. Adam addresses these claims here in the context of the wider evidence for Saudi government support.
Moussaoui actually fingered Faisal first, because Faisal was then the Saudi intelligence chief at the time, and that would make a little bit of sense because it was Faisal who met with bin Laden before he goes to Sudan and offers a reprieve of sorts. because at the time bin Laden was actually held in a house arrest and his passport was taken away. And it was bin Faisal, according to Seymour Hersh in an article he wrote a while back. It was Prince Turki Al Faisal, who meets with bin Laden in his home, and he tells him, "Well, we have an idea." He goes, "We'll let you have your businesses back, your assets back to your father's construction program, which is the Saudi bin Laden group. Have you all your assets and relinquish your passport, but you can't live in Saudi Arabia." And so the idea came from Hassan al-Turabi, who's head of the National Islamic Front in Sudan, who offers bin Laden temporary residence. And he takes him up on the offer. He actually sends a couple of emissaries from Al-Qaeda there. One of them was al-Banshari. And he says that, yes, this is a theocratic type of government. And so bin Laden goes and takes everybody with him, slowly but surely. Moussaoui, during the course of the trial, hints that there were Saudi intelligence operatives funding the 9/11 operation. And afterwards, he then makes the bold declaration in a letter to the presiding judge who sentenced him. And he writes this letter and he states that Prince Turki Al Faisal, Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who was the Saudi ambassador to the United States, and Prince Al Tawid bin Talal, who gave funding to Saudi nationals through Riggs Bank, and that the funding was then extracted by the wives of the Saudi nationals inside the United States, of Omar al-Bayoumi and Osama Basnan, and the wives of the Saudis themselves, of Prince Bandar bin Sultan, then sent periodical checks, monthly checks of anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 for the next 24 months between the years 1999 to 2002. So this funding is going directly to third-hand accounts, to the hands of two people out west. That's Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. The connection is made through wire transfers, and it becomes almost like it's now solidified with the testimony of Moussaoui. Moussaoui's already in jail. He's doing life in prison. He's in Adamak State, Colorado prison. So there's no, I guess, there's no reprieve for him. And why would he make this up? I believe it's true. It's true anyway, but this really brings home the fact that the Saudi government, most of those who are still in function today, bin Sultan is still around, and so is Talal and Faisal. In fact, Talal is still he's a billionaire investor for most of the southwest of the United States. He's friends with Hillary Clinton. He's also friends with certain elements within the Trump government, because he's a big-time prominent Saudi investor who has a lot of interest here in the United States and vice versa. So they're willing to protect these people at all costs. And incidentally enough, when Moussaoui came out with this revelation, Ramzi Youssef, who was a suspect in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, also doing life at Adamak State, Colorado prison, actually sent a death threat to Moussaoui. So why would he do that in that term? I don't understand why, but maybe it's because Youssef himself also may have had contacts with the Saudi government in terms of funding for 1993. That is also speculation, by the way. But it
is hard. It's hard to think of that, right? Like why Youssef would be so loyal to the Saudi state after spending 15 years in that point in jail, even if he did have funding from them. And it's not. I mean, one of the things that's strange about the 93 bombing was the absence of money they had. They didn't have enough money to get poor old, what's his name, a plane ticket out of the country.
Mohammed
Salome, that's the one, So
right,
it's a whole strange thing, and there's no obvious reason why Youssef would want to protect the Saudi state that
Right, and I think that funding came from Osama bin Laden's brother-in-law, Mohammed bin Khalifa, Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, who actually was getting funding from the Saudi government to prop up businesses in the Philippines. And that would make sense because that's where Ramzi Youssef trained
right.
in the Philippines with Abu Sayyaf and learning how to create urea nitrate bombs and, of course, small hand grenades and makeshift bombs as well. And there was a big bombing campaign in the Philippines in the mid-1990s, actually. Incidentally enough, there was also an FBI informant and also an informant for the Philippine National Police, Edward Angeles, who actually comes out. Yeah.
I'll stop you there, Adam, because I'd love to talk to you about Edward Angeles, but I think we should do an Edward Angeles episode then, and not.
Right,
So we just wanted to, because we didn't mention this in the first sort of run through, but it's an important thing to mention. We've talked about Omar Bayoumi and the connection to the hijackers in previous episodes, the whole Saudi funding of. And I'll talk about it again, but it's just worth linking in there, So thanks.
I don't want. I'm glad you cut me off because I would have just kept going.
Yeah, I look forward to that and the whole situation of the Philippines and the connection maybe to the Oklahoma City bombing and all the rest. A lot to say about it, but not for now. Okay, thanks, Adam.
Thank you.